Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 1, Episode 8, Veritas. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to Season 1, Episode 8. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So, I like this episode. I thought it was a pretty good episode. Now, I always talk, if you've seen my previous reviews on Lower Decks, I always say the word structure a lot. And there's a reason for that. It's because I think that's probably the show's biggest issue is with structure and pacing, but I think that has more to do with structure. The first couple episodes were like way too kinetic, energetic, and the structure was kind of all over the place. I talked about last week's episode how I thought the structure was awful. This week, it was a really good structure. That was the first thing I noticed. And it actually helps it feel more like Star Trek. And I think that's kind of what, I mean, sometimes people will get on other people's cases with newer shows like Discovery or Picard being it doesn't feel like Star Trek or whatever, and other people were like, well, does it really need to? And to an extent it does, and to an extent it doesn't. But with Lower Decks, I think what it's trying to do, it wants to feel like Star Trek. It wants to be like an episode of Star Trek, but in a comedic light. And so if it's not going to follow all the same rules. It's going to play a bit fast and loose with logic and whatnot for just comedy's sake. But it will, but that's fine. And I think that's the purpose of the show. But I think this show has helped when, the comedy has helped, the storytelling has helped, when it does feel like Star Trek, because it's kind of the purpose of the show. So you get an episode like last week's episode, which didn't feel like Star Trek. It was just all over the place, and the plot wasn't really well constructed, and it was hard to follow, and it seems like this shit were happening. That doesn't work. But when you have something like this week where you have a very concrete story and a plot structure that is really well done, then it helps. It helps the comedy. It helps the enjoyment, the entertainment value. It just makes it an overall better episode. Now, because this episode follows a typical format that we've seen before in a lot of fiction, but in Star Trek in particular, the trial episode, and more specifically a trial where we get told, where the episode starts as a trial and we get told the story of what happened and how they ended up at the trial in flashback. They did this, I believe, in Court Martial in the original series. They did this in the episode of Deep Space Nine called Rules of Engagement, and I think there were a couple other examples. Maybe Matter of Perspective might be another example of that, where we start with the trial and then we get told this. And I love the Lower Decks did that format, but they put their own spin on it, and they made it it was, a bit crazy, and some of the storytelling was a bit fragmented, but I think it worked because it had that structure, that maintaining the story of the trial. And so you got all these crazy flashbacks like the Gorn wedding, which pretty much had nothing to do with anything, but it all worked because of the structure that was holding the whole thing together about the trial, and I think that was done very well. Now, as I was watching this episode, I was thinking, wow, this is a good episode. It's probably going to be one of my favorites of the season, unless it has a horrible ending. But I was like, what are the chances of that? That's not going to happen. Yeah. I'm sorry, but that ending was stupid. I think that ending does kind of ruin the episode a bit. Now, yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead and talk about the ending first, because I think the ending kind of dictates what the whole episode is about, really. And I think that's stupid. Oh, it's a party. I mean, granted, I know the obvious kind of argument, well, Mark, it's a comedy, it's supposed to be stupid. But yeah, I mean, and there are many cases where Lower Decks plays fast and loose with, logic or whatever, and does ridiculous over the top things that I you give a pass to, and I give a pass to, because it's a comedy, and if it works for the storytelling, if it works for the comedy, then that's fine. I don't have to take this show too seriously, but sometimes there is also the case where you can take it too far. And I say this not just about Lower Decks. You're just being critical because it's the Star Trek show. No, I don't say this just about Lower Decks. I say this about I was just reviewing BoJack Horseman, which I think is one of the best animated show, or the best animated show of all time. And there are a couple episodes in that case where I think they take the comedy too far, and it actively interferes with the entertainment value of the episode when they do something that's too ridiculous and over the top. And I think that's exactly the case here. Clearly, the whole gag, and again the excuse reel will be like, whoa, it's just their culture is different, and so their celebrations look like trials to humans, which is, no, I'm sorry, but no, that is a ridiculous concept on its head. And because there's some things that just can't be explained away, like his whole demeanor and the way he's talking. And don't give me that bullshit about, oh, that's an alien, that's how they celebrate. But no, bullshit, plot contrivance. And other stuff with the eels, the deadly tank of eels. Like, do you notice, like, at the end of the episode when they revealed what it was, whenever someone brought up the eels, they changed the subject or they glossed over it. They never actually answered why the hell the guy would be threatening to kill people in the tank of eels at a celebration. Like, that makes no sense. And whenever anyone brought it up, they're like, the subject got changed, because there's no answer to that. There was an obvious plot contrivance to try to make you think it's a trial. And so I think that did not totally ruin the episode, but it did ruin the episode a little bit for me. I would have enjoyed this episode a lot better had it actually just been a trial. You know what this reminds me of? And I'm sorry, this is the first thing that came to mind. The more I think about this comparison, the more I think it's really apt. And that is, it's only a game. And now, for Deep Space Nine fans, you'll know what I'm referring to. But if you don't know what I'm referring to an episode of the first season of Deep Space Nine, which is not that good of a season. There's an episode called Move Along Home, which most people consider one of the worst episodes of the show. I personally think people are too harsh on it, but that's just me. But anyway, it's generally considered to be one of the worst episodes, where this group of aliens take Cisco and the senior staff and put them through all this, life-threatening tasks and everything, while Quark is like playing a game. But you find out at the end of the episode that their lives were never in danger because it's only a game. I think that's exactly what they did here. In fact, I may be so bold that I think it's worse than this episode. And I don't want to hear, oh, but Lower Decks is a comedy. Guess what? Move Along Home was a comedy too. Doesn't excuse it. The whole thing with, because that's basically what they did, that their lives were never in danger, or they didn't say that specifically, because to be fair, Freeman said that their lives were endangered. Like, oh, you almost got killed at a celebration. But that makes no sense. It makes no sense. Why would they threaten to kill him with eels at a celebration? And here's why I think it's worse than Move Along Home. Because in this episode in particular, you have to get a lot of contrivance in order and this is something that's done a lot in TV, and I always point it out as a trope that I really hate, that there's something the main characters don't know, but some of the other characters do know it, and they're not aware that our main characters don't know it, but they just so happen to speak in a way and behave in a way and act in a way that doesn't give away to our main characters exactly what's going on. And so that is the dictionary definition of contrived writing, because people have to speak in a very specific way to not give away said information until once it's revealed to the audience. Then they can reveal it all they want. An example of this is I'll actually give an example of an episode I like, but I hate the trope in the episode. That's, again, getting back to Deep Space Nine Season 1. There's an episode called Captive Pursuit, which I actually think is a really good episode about... I'm not going to explain the whole plot. You guys are Star Trek... Star Trek watchers, you should know this. But anyway... Tusk, throughout the episode, does not reveal who he is, that he's, a prey that's being hunted. And he has to talk in a very specific way to avoid giving this away. But of course, once it's revealed to the audience, he full on flat out. And that's a problem here. And this is why I think it's worse than Move Along Home, because they had to contrive the dialogue in such a way. Now, I did go back and watch this a second time after knowing the twist, and I will say, and I'm sure some of the defenders will point out, that there are some lines that you can see were written with in mind that it was a celebration. How he kept trying to insist that the senior staff were heroes and kept trying to push them to talk about their big heroes. But at the same time, he had to. I don't think that's an excuse at all, because I think that is overruled by the way all of the other mountain of dialogue that had to be carefully crafted to not give away that it was the celebration, and not just to not give away it was the celebration, but also to make it appear as if it was a trial. And so you can't say, oh, alien culture, whatever. Don't give me that nonsense. It's contrived writing. So I'm sorry. That really bothered me. But I still like this episode. I didn't like it as much as I would have had they actually hit the landing, actually made it a freaking trial. I think the episode would have been way better. But when I do, taking that ending out, I do enjoy the meat of the episode. I think this is, sometimes I complain about Lower Decks and their Star Trek references. I actually like the references in this episode. And I like how we get a bunch of backstories and vignettes that kind of make fun of and play off of Star Trek tropes. I think the Rutherford storyline I really liked. It was kind of making fun of how how his thing kept updating. It was making fun of how computers update for no reason, and I love how it was like knocked him out to update just we got to update the Klingon font, and like, do you really need to update for that? It knocks him out, and I feel that way every time my computer updates. I'm like, and my computer actually like broke once because I didn't let it update. Like, why does it need to update for all this bullshit it doesn't even need? So I like that. I thought that was funny. And we got a reference to Roga Danar when Bulmer and Mariner were having an argument of who the biggest badass is. You know what? I kind of side with Bulmer on Roga Danar over Khan, just because I'm sick of hearing about Khan. Khan's so overrated. I'm sorry. It's the easy answer. And for Mariner to be like, oh, get the fuck out of here with the Roga Danar, I actually think that's a deep cut. If you didn't catch the reference, Roga Danar refers to the Next Generation episode, The Hunted, who was this prisoner of war who escaped, and the Enterprise was just helping recapture him, but he totally eluded the Enterprise. He eventually got captured, but then he escaped again. He's very cunning and whatnot. I don't think his hair was that impressive, so I don't know why Bulmer mentioned that, but whatever. And I think, I don't know. I think I'm willing to forgive the fact that Bulmer and Mariner were bridge officers, because I think it's been pretty well established that they don't really serve on the bridge. I mean, sometimes they go to give coffee. Actually, I think they said that in a previous episode. The only time they go to the bridge is to serve coffee or to give reports or something. They don't actually serve at the con and ops. And I don't see why they would have asked for Bulmer's to assess the situation. Even if he was, let's say he is a regular bridge crew who serves at the con, why would they ask an ensign? Like, Picard never asked a random ensign who was at con to assess the situation. But I guess, whatever. It's for the comedy. It's so they could throw in the jokes about he didn't really know what he was talking about, and he was trying to hide it because he didn't want to get Rutherford in trouble. That was okay. I mean, what I do love, and again, this is the Star Trek reference, is how Freeman told Mariner to send them a message, and so she shot the phasers off the thing, and like, no, we want you to send them a message to invite them to dinner. Because it's making fun of a trope, because that's something they often do in Star Trek. With like, oh, let's send them a message, so they fire phasers like into space to send them. But really, I think it's a joke. But I think if Freeman actually wanted to invite them to dinner, she should have said invite them to dinner. But I do think that was pretty funny that let's send them a message, and. The Tendi stuff was funny too, actually, and here's another reason why I do like this episode a lot. Is because, as I was saying a lot in these reviews, that I get sick of the same format of just Rutherford and Tendi going off doing their thing while Bulmer and Mariner do their thing, and I never really got a feel that this felt like a group dynamic. I got that feel in this episode. Even though each one had their own separate story, you still had the feel, especially at the trial, that this was a group and they were working together. Even during their individual stories, they were a bit intertwined. So I like that aspect of this episode too. I thought that really worked. And then I like the Tendy's storyline was also good. I also really liked that, how she kept trying to bring up the fact that she wasn't this cleaner. And I thought the scene with the other guy saying, oh, they're scanning! Oh no, they're scanning again! That actually, it went on for maybe a bit too long, but I actually thought that was hilarious. Especially, because Tendi kept trying to confess, and she's like, oh, come on. Yeah, and then she is like, and when Ransom said to all right, cleaner, do your thing. She's like, I have a thing? What's my thing? And so she like kicked all the other Ramon's asses, and they were like, oh, why? I thought she was just gonna transport us away. Which, why would they call someone who's just there to transport them away cleaner? I suppose you maybe, but she didn't even use like the whatchamacallit, those pattern enhancers. So couldn't anyone just beam them away? I don't know, but I still thought it was funny. Oh yeah, and you get more Star Trek references when the Romulans talking to each other, saying, "Oh, Remans are the worst." Now, for those who may think, "Oh, well, Remans, that's just a Star Trek Nemesis thing. Let's wipe that under the rug." I gotta fact check you. Nemesis actually wasn't the Remans' only appearance, as they did appear in the background in season 4 of Star Trek Enterprise. I mean, what do you want to do? They invented the Remans for Nemesis, clearly, and we didn't really have much other than Enterprise that came out after Nemesis, so there you go. But anyway, you got them name dropped there. You also had, they name dropped Giant Spock, which is from an episode of the animated series, a terrible episode, by the way, but that was interesting too. Oh, yeah, because Bulmer, he name dropped Giant Spock when he was talking about horrible things famous people did, and he mentioned Dr. Crusher and the Space Ghost. Leave her alone! I love that. Oh, I gotta watch the scene to see exactly what Bulmer said, but of course, like in real life, no one would care about that sort of thing, but it was really, of course, a meta commentary about how that episode was so terrible, which I'm talking about the Sub Rosa episode from Next Generation, and that's an episode I've reviewed several times recently, and I've seen it recently, so yeah, I did appreciate that reference a lot. But let's stop beating around the bush here and get into my favorite aspect of this episode, or the favorite joke of the episode, is the Q appearance. Now, I knew because they mentioned in like con interviews or whatever, Star Trek Day BS they were doing, that John Delancey was going to appear on Lower Decks as Q. So I knew this was coming, but I thought this was a really good use. Like, it could have went poorly, but I thought it was... I just really like the humor, especially that the whole Bulmer's thing where he was pointing out all the shitty things that the senior staff had done. And they mentioned you, and they was like dressed up as chess pieces on a chessboard, but across from them were like playing cards. But then the soccer ball came out, and I was like, oh, what the hell are we supposed to do? Maybe, we're gonna play soccer. But then the soccer ball had arms and legs and started talking. Oh, we got a puzzle for you, and they're like, ah, fuck, I don't know. that was, I feel like that's specifically poking fun off of Hayden Q, which is not a good episode. That actually made my top 30 worst episodes of Next Generation, where he was like, did somebody say games? And so that was a nice jab at that. But what I appreciate even more was Q's appearance at the end of the episode, which of course was silly and over the top, but this time in a really, really good way. Like, I love that use of Q at the end of the episode when he was like, okay, we're gonna play games to test humanity, and they're like, not now, Q, we don't have time for your bullshit, we had a hard day. And they just walk past him and like, go bother Picard. I love that. I thought that this is exactly the kind of Star Trek humor that I want to get out of this show, and I think it did it. I think it did it very well. And I also got to mention in Bulmer's sort of spiel about how the senior staff fucked up that scene where the cat doctor was on the wrong ship, and she's like, oh, something's wrong, nobody recognizes me, I might be in a parallel dimension, and she was just went on the wrong ship that just so happened to have different versions of all the characters. Even though it's not a one-to-one comparison, that made me think of Remember Me. I guess because this doctor looks so much like Dr. Crusher, and she was also like, you know, in that case she was the only one who was aware of something that was wrong where everyone else was oblivious to it. So that's the only comparison I got. I guess it's almost more like Whispers, though, because when O'Brien thought that something was wrong with everyone else on the station, but it turned out it was just he was a clone. Yes, it was kind of reminded me of that too. So I love that. I love those references. I thought they were absolutely great. But yeah, so I might have actually loved this episode and put it up really high if it wasn't for that ending, which I think kind of ruined it. So anyway, my rating for Veritas out of 10, I'm going to give this a 7, very good. It's, as I said, I would probably give this an 8 or 9 if it wasn't for that ending, but the ending brings it down to at least a 7. I'm sorry, but that is very contrived writing. It's too ridiculous. I just actively didn't like it. It doesn't make any sense. It's just, I'm not willing to forgive that as a comedy episode for that. But that being said, it doesn't completely ruin the episode, because there's still a lot that works about it. The character interactions, the structure, as I said, and the jokes. And it's actually a really funny episode. And I think, like, the whole format of telling the stories through the trial, they used this format very well. And they actually used it, of course, to mock Star Trek for doing this before in the past in a very effective way. So, ultimately, yeah. It was a very enjoyable episode. Like I said, I watched it twice in one day. So, yeah, really enjoyed it. Even though it's only a game. Anyway, that's it for my review of Veritas. Be sure to check out my channel as I cover Lower Decks every week. 2 more episodes left. And then, of course, when Lower Decks is over, I'm going to jump straight into Discovery. So yeah, be sure to check out my channel for that, and I cover many other shows like all other things Star Trek and other shows as well, such as The Expanse, BoJack Horseman, The Boys, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.